Hello everyone, and welcome to Fresh Master Channel. Today, we are going to have some story from Reddit. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below. These simple clips mean a lot to the future of this channel.
Social media exploded in popularity in the early 2000s, drawing users in droves. Across various platforms, the number of accounts quickly grew from millions to billions. Yet the authenticity of many of these profiles remained uncertain. Despite their popularity, these platforms held no appeal for some of us. We just weren't tempted to check them out. However, my teenage daughter, Evelyn, was eager to get involved, and right after she turned 13, my wife, Sarah, allowed her to sign up. I had my reservations about it, but I trusted Sarah's judgment. She was a fantastic mom, and usually made wise decisions. A few weeks later, during one of our dinners, Evelyn wondered if Sarah and I might be interested in joining too. "Sure, that sounds great," Sarah agreed cheerfully. "No thanks, I'll pass," I said, hoping that would close the topic. Yet Evelyn persisted, eager to convince us. "It's really fun, Dad. You get to see what your friends are up to, and there are all kinds of games you can play." "Sweetie, I already catch up with my friends face-to-face or over the phone. I don't need a website for that. Plus, we have plenty of games around here if I want to play," I countered. "But Dad, what about Aunt Linda? When did you last talk to her?" "Oh," I said, pausing, trying to recall when exactly. "I think it was a couple of weeks ago." "Did you hear she got a new car? About 6 weeks back? It's red and looks really cool. Beth, her cousin, will be getting Aunt Linda's old car when she gets her license in a few months." "You're friends with Aunt Linda on there? And she got a new car?" I was a bit surprised. I thought her old one wasn't that old. Sarah nodded, smirking at my surprise and expression, though part of my reaction was due to the unsettling thought of my niece driving on actual roads instead of just around their church parking lot. "Yeah," Evelyn replied, looking at me like I was crazy for not knowing. "Told you should join." Sarah and I discussed it that night. I suppose I shouldn't have been too surprised when Sarah took Evelyn's side, especially since she had already given our daughter permission to join and had set up her own account. Sarah said to me, "She might be right. It could be a good way to stay connected with our relatives and some of our old high school and college friends." "I'm not sure I'd want to stay in touch with a lot of them," I grumbled. I already kept up with my close male friends. The situation with girls was quite different. In high school, most either treated me badly or viewed me as a younger, immature brother. College was no different. The vast majority of co-eds ignored me outright. However, there were exceptions in such a large environment, especially as I progressed through my education. I made several female friends during college and even had a couple of girlfriends during my junior and senior years. That's why we decided to give social media a shot, though my main reason was secretly to monitor Evelyn's online activities closely. I had heard about dangers for young girls online, so I was determined to protect my daughter from them. I kept a close watch on Evelyn's account and was relieved to see that she displayed the level-headedness we had instilled in her. As my concerns eased, I also used the platform to reconnect with old friends. However, I made sure to avoid any interactions with former lovers to prevent upsetting my wife. There weren't many former lovers anyway. Besides a couple of chance encounters, they were all ex-girlfriends, except for one young lady from the building next door during my grad school days. Nowadays, she might be considered a friend with benefits, as we would hang out, drink wine, and occasionally get intimate. I figured it was okay to reminisce about old crushes as long as neither they nor Sarah knew about my previous feelings. I eventually reconnected with Maria, one of the few female friends I had from freshman and sophomore years. She was a close friend and also an unconscious crush of mine, but I made sure to keep our relationship strictly platonic. Based on past experiences, I knew trying to turn it romantic could ruin our friendship forever. So she inadvertently tugged at my heartstrings over time without realizing it. By the latter part of junior year, we naturally drifted apart as I began dating other girls more successfully. I didn't notice Maria's gradual distance until it was too late. Feeling we had never crossed any boundaries, I reached out to her as mature adults, sending a friendly note and a friend request, and eagerly awaited her response. When her reply came a few days later, I was taken aback. "Tom Jarrett, I'm sorry, but I don't recall ever knowing anyone by that name. You must have mistaken me for someone else." Knowing Maria's sense of humor from college, I initially thought she was joking. "Nice one, Maria. You almost had me there. How have you been?" But when I checked my computer next, her response was clear. "I'm serious. I really don't remember you. You must have the wrong person." That was a blow. We didn't hang out much in our senior year, but we shared a few classes freshman and sophomore years before she changed majors. Maybe she just wasn't reminiscing about our time together, so I tried to jog her memory. Remember the Delta Lamb party with Mark and Christy? You sprained your ankle and I carried you piggyback to your dorm. We iced your ankle and you promised me a back massage once you felt better. By the way, I never got to collect on that. A week later, she replied, "Sorry, you've mistaken me for someone else. I've never injured my ankle like that. And I wouldn't promise a back massage to anyone except a very close boyfriend. Please don't contact me again." That stung more than it should have. I mulled it over and decided that since she sent a final message, I deserved one too. I made it clear that it would be my last message and I wouldn't bother her again. After carefully crafting my response, I sent it. "Dear Maria, it's probably better that you don't remember me and that we won't reconnect. Truthfully, it would likely go against the agreement I have with my wife about avoiding past connections. Even though you were unaware of the crush I had on you, I remember it well. It would feel dishonest to my wife if she were to inquire about our friendship. Perhaps you're aware of this, which might explain your hesitation to say hello. Either way, I understand and won't reach out again. I sincerely wish you a lifetime of happiness and good health. Yours from afar, Tom." I included a photo from my college album showing us with friends at a party during our sophomore year. Despite any denials, it was undeniable proof of our past connection. After sending that final message, Maria never replied, and I kept my promise not to contact her again. I returned the photo album to the basement and resolved to be more cautious about reconnecting with anyone Sarah might object to. Despite my efforts, Sarah reconnected with an ex-lover during a business trip to Chicago, which led to the end of our marriage. The trust we had built over 17 years was shattered. Evelyn was heartbroken, but eventually accepted the situation, dividing her time between Sarah and me. It was heartening to see her grow into a smart, beautiful young woman with promising opportunities. While Evelyn primarily lived with Sarah, I gradually recovered from the shock of Sarah's infidelity. I sought a more mature approach to life and had a few girlfriends over the years, but realized that commitment was more suited to cling wrap than to relationships seeking a fresh start. About 7 years later, "Hello? Hey, Tom, it's Andy Reiner. How are you?" "Hi, Andy. Good to hear from you. I'm doing well. How about yourself?" Andy and I hadn't kept in touch much lately, but we exchanged cards and occasional notes during Christmas to catch up. "Never been better, my friend. Say, have you heard about our upcoming class reunion? 25 years, can you believe it? Gloria and I are thinking about going, but we want to see if any of our old buddies will be there. We don't want to end up at a table alone with strangers if none of our closer friends show up. You know how it goes?" "Yeah, I skipped our 20-year reunion for that exact reason," I confessed, although that wasn't the only reason. It was shortly after my divorce was finalized, and I wasn't keen on discussing it if I bumped into friends, let alone strangers. "Do you know who's confirmed to attend?" "Well, right now, besides Gloria and me, we've got confirmations from Mark Savone, Keith, and Gabby Schilling." He listed off about 10 or 12 people I was close with, including Mark, my best friend and best man, and 3 couples. Some were definite attendees, while others were still deciding. That was enough for me to make a decision by the time he finished. "Sounds like a great group, and I'm excited to catch up with everyone. Count me in as a yes. I'll go register right after we finish our call. The reunion is in October during homecoming, so we've got 3 months to go. Gloria and I are really looking forward to seeing you there. Please give her my regards, my friend. Talk to you again soon." 20 minutes later, I had registered to attend, signed up for some of the special activities, and got tickets for the homecoming game against the Cats. Later that evening, I weighed myself and set a goal to shed 10 pounds before the reunion. Even though I'd still be about 15 pounds above my college weight, I figured it would make me look pretty good. Reunion weekend finally arrived with 10 of us committed to attending. Mark and I were the only ones who were single, although Mark had never been married. Larry and Nina were both on their second marriages after divorcing their first spouses shortly after tying the knot. Keith and Gabby had married right after graduation, setting an example for those of us still in our first and only marriages, which made me feel somewhat down considering my own plans. On Friday, there were several activities planned, so I flew in on Thursday afternoon. A few of us gathered for dinner that evening and later had drinks at the hotel bar. Mark and I had been roommates during our sophomore year and remained close friends, so we spent the evening together chatting with our group and others who came and went throughout the night. The next day, Friday, we attended campus tours and seminars with some of our couple friends. The campus had changed considerably with new buildings and artwork, yet in many ways it still retained its charm, with young students socializing on the plaza and others rushing to class. "I remember those days," remarked Mark, "talking to girls until the last minute and then racing to class." "Yeah, they'd chat you up," I chuckled. "Did you see the note in the reunion brochure about the pizza joint near campus? It's still there, but it's under new management. I wonder if they've redecorated." "Redecorated?" "I'm more curious if the pizza still tastes the same." We texted our group and met at the pizza place for slices and beer. The lobby displayed photos of past and recent visitors, including athletes and celebrities. Unfortunately, half the reunion attendees had the same idea, resulting in a long wait. This allowed us to chat and unwind. Josh and Stephanie shared stories of their European tour after selling their company, while Gloria discussed her upcoming book. Mark excused himself when he spotted Jane Mealer, his old crush from freshman and sophomore years. They finally hit it off nearly 30 years later. After decent pizza, I attended afternoon activities alone. Mark and Jane were absent from dinner, making me smile at the thought of their reconnection. We enjoyed a nice meal and conversation, briefly paying attention to class leaders' speeches. They welcomed us, acknowledged guests, made fundraising appeals, and reflected on our class. By the second or third plea for funds, most of us tuned out, and the speakers eventually wrapped up, allowing the music to begin. I mingled around the ballroom, catching up with old friends. I danced with Gabby, who was tired after dancing with Keith, and then with Nina and Stephanie. Later, Gloria joined me on the dance floor, prompting Andy to jokingly send her my way. A slow dance began, and as I was about to escort Gloria back, she suggested we waltz with some space between us. While dancing, she asked how I was doing, mentioning that she and Andy had been concerned about me and wanted to ensure I was all right. I appreciated my friend's care, but honestly, answering truthfully was a bit disheartening. So I escorted Gloria back to our table, thanked her and Andy, then headed to the bar for a drink. Standing in line, I glanced across the dance floor behind me and spotted Maria making her way towards the line. My heart raced more than it should have for someone who had been a crush nearly 28 or 29 years earlier. But she was still as lovely as ever, albeit visibly older. When she saw me, I waved, and she smiled and waved back before her expression turned serious. Approaching her, I greeted, "Hi, Maria, remember me?" She looked down for a moment before meeting my gaze and nodding. "Hi, Tom. Of course I remember you," she replied, opening her arms for a hug. Not wanting to miss the chance, I embraced my old friend for the first time in years. She felt comforting in my arms, and I rested my head against hers, taking in the scent of her hair. We held each other for several seconds before she squeezed tighter briefly and then relaxed. Taking the cue, I released the hug in return. "How have you been?" I asked. She glanced around before turning back to me. "Tom, can we get a drink and find somewhere private to talk?" We grabbed our drinks and wandered into the lobby, finding an empty sofa where we could sit and chat. "Is this all right?" "Sure, this works," she said with a smile. "It's so noisy in there that it's hard to gather my thoughts, and Tom, I owe you an apology and an explanation. That whole wrong person act you pulled, was that about 7 or 8 years ago?" She nodded. "I'm really sorry, Tom. I was so excited when I received your first message that I started typing right away. But as soon as I finished typing your name," she chuckled softly, "I only got as far as 3 letters, T-O-M, before I realized the implications if my incredibly jealous husband found out. Delete, delete, delete. It hurt each time, and my heart ached continuously over the next couple of days until I finally replied saying you had the wrong person. That hurt even more. I'm sorry, Maria, and I'm sorry I kept pushing." I sighed. "Actually, later on, I wondered if you truly remembered, but didn't want to reconnect because of your marriage. I would have understood and let it go. I should have just admitted it, Tom, and said we couldn't be friends at that time, but I needed— what's that term? Plausible deniability? Yes, exactly. Plausible deniability in case Vince found out. We were going through a rough patch back then. Are things better between you two now?" She took a deep breath and shook her head slowly. "There's nothing between us now. We divorced 3 years ago, after our son started college. It's like we live in separate worlds. We hardly speak unless it's about something happening in Vinny's life. If he ever gets married, they might have to have 2 ceremonies, so Vince and I can each attend one." Ouch, I'm sorry to hear that. Sarah and I don't communicate much these days either, but we still try to present a united front when it comes to Evelyn. She's a junior in college this year and is planning to pursue a career as a veterinarian. Maria, what's the matter? Tom, do you ever think about, what could have been? Yeah, sometimes, but I try not to dwell too much on missed opportunities that never materialized. Why do you ask? What's on your mind? Do you remember when you sent me that last note where you mentioned you had a big crush on me? Tom, usually girls pick up on some sort of hint in those situations, some sign, but I never got anything like that from you, no hints at all. Or maybe I was just oblivious because we were such good friends. Anyway, I've often wondered what it might have been like if we had taken a chance and gotten together, even just for one night. Maria, you were a dear friend, and I wanted to keep it that way. I hate to admit it, but I still had some growing up to do back then. Yes, I had a big crush on you, but I had what you might call a wide range of crushes during freshman and sophomore years when we were close friends. I usually had crushes on several girls at once before starting to figure things out later in college, including the realization that it's not wise to have more than one crush at a time. However, during those first 2 years, it was rare that any of those crushes led anywhere. I chuckled, recalling some of the disasters. On the rare occasions when they did, it usually didn't end well. So instead of risking our friendship, I tried to conceal my silly crush on you. Sometimes I admitted it to one of the other girls as a cover, just to keep you in what today's youth might call the friend zone. Maria laughed. Tom, I think that term is well established, and maybe even outdated now. We both chuckled, but I wanted to steer the conversation forward. Maria, it doesn't matter anymore. If we're talking old expressions, it's like water under the bridge, far downstream by now. Maria looked deeply into my eyes before slowly shaking her head. No, Tom, it's not irrelevant, and yes, it does matter. Take me upstairs to my room, or yours, and let's explore something new together. I've spent 7 years, or however long, wondering. Now I don't have to wonder anymore. She didn't need to ask again. I took her hand and we headed straight to the elevator. As soon as the doors closed, we were close together, her hands clutching my jacket to ensure I wasn't slipping away, and mine cradling her face, savoring her softness and the passion with which she kissed me. She kicked off her heels before we exited the elevator, and we practically dashed down the hallway to my room, giggling all the way. There, I locked the door behind us, and our kissing continued fervently. Oh, Tom, why didn't we do this back then? She whispered. Why was I so blind as to not see it? And why were you so afraid to tell me? Seriously, we wasted years that we could have been together, she said. Shh, don't say that, Maria. We had lives to lead, children to raise. But it's not too late to start now. We spent Saturday morning in bed, then grabbed brunch and headed to the game. Our tickets were in the same section, and we managed to sit together. The game was intense, with our team winning by 4 points in a thrilling finish. As underdogs, the stadium erupted in celebration. Maria and I went to our rooms to change for dinner. When I knocked on her door, she pulled me inside, and we almost missed our reservation due to making out. Mark and Jane noticed our smiles at dinner, mirroring their own. After dinner, we joined friends at the class party. We mingled and danced until Maria gave me a certain look. We left shortly after and returned to her room. That night, our lovemaking was even more passionate and confident. Despite living far apart, me in Dallas, Maria near NYC, we decided to keep our relationship steady but casual. Maria insisted we avoid making it official due to the distance, though I hoped for more. Over the next few months, we stayed connected, talking weekly and texting daily, seeing each other about once a month. To keep our relationship private from my daughter, Evelyn, and her ex, Vinny, we met in neutral places, exploring and relaxing in hotels with great room service and comfortable beds, where we spent most of our time together. However, things didn't quite go as we had planned. As our relationship progressed, my feelings for Maria grew stronger, and before long, I found myself falling in love with her, just as I had suspected might happen. We had agreed earlier not to rush into declaring our love, so I held back, contemplating how I could align my life and career to be with her full-time. While I wasn't enthusiastic about living in New Jersey or New York City, I was increasingly open to the idea of making sacrifices to spend my life with Maria. I was even willing to consider moving to a neutral city if she wasn't keen on relocating to Dallas with me. In May, we met up in Charleston for a weekend getaway. My flight had been delayed on Friday, and with our time together starting with a romantic Friday evening and Saturday morning in the hotel, we hadn't even ventured out to explore the city. As we lounged in the hotel room, I pulled out my laptop to look up local attractions I had bookmarked, hoping to entice Maria to venture out with me. Since it was a week before her birthday weekend, I had also secretly arranged a spa trip for her on Saturday afternoon, hoping to surprise her with a special treat. Maybe she'll have other ideas, I murmured to myself, considering different ways to spend the day together. Suddenly, a phone rang, seemingly from within our room. It wasn't my phone or Maria's, so I searched around the room trying to locate it. The ringing stopped before I could find it. I kept searching, but the sound had been faint and muffled, making it hard to pinpoint. Just as I was about to give up, the ringing started again. This time, I was determined to track it down, realizing it must have fallen behind or inside the dresser, possibly wedged behind a drawer. I continued searching and found the phone hidden in one of the drawers beneath Maria's clothes. It didn't belong to Maria, so I picked it up, curious about who had left it and how Maria hadn't noticed it when she packed her clothes. She hadn't brought much since we were leaving the next day. Since the phone had stopped ringing, I decided to take it to the front desk. Maybe they could locate the owner once I confirmed with Maria that it wasn't her work phone. I set it aside and returned to my laptop, but a series of notification sounds drew me back to the phone. I couldn't unlock it, but I saw some partial text messages on the screen, and another message popped up as I tried to make sense of them. WTF, are you? You're not at your sister's. Had to trick it out of her, but Trudy says you haven't. Trudy? That was Maria's sister's name, though we hadn't met. Maria had mentioned her a couple of times. You better be home when I get there or so. Call me now. A little later, I was still sitting on the edge of the bed, feeling deflated, when Maria walked in, practically dancing with joy. Oh, Tom, thank you so much. That was amazing. Tom, what's the matter? She seemed shocked, as if I had a stroke or something. But when I held up the phone for her to see, her face drained of color and she looked crushed. The phone kept ringing, Maria, and ringing. Did you forget to turn it off? She shook her head vigorously, tears streaming down her face. No, God, no. What game are you playing, Maria? Letting me fall for you while you're with someone else? Another lover? A husband? That's it, isn't it? God, Maria, how could you? If you're still married, we can't be together. Tom, no, it's not what you think. Really? So it's not your husband? The one you said you divorced? Or maybe you didn't? Or did you remarry and forget to tell me about that? She tried to hug me, to pull me into her arms like she had before with her lies. I stepped away, not wanting her touch. Oh, damn it, Tom. Please. It is Vince, but it's not what you think. Oh, really? I said incredulously. So all this time I've been falling for you, it hasn't been a complete lie? I grumbled, trying to keep my voice steady. And we're not cheaters, the scum of the earth like Sarah and her friend? Please tell me that's not true, because right now, that's how it looks to me and it's making me sick. I'm struggling to keep my lunch down, and if I manage that, I'm seriously considering walking out that door and never looking back. Tom, please, let me explain, please. Fine, but only because I cared about you, Maria. Or at least I thought I did. Now I'm not so sure, but go ahead, I'm listening. No more lies. She sat back on the bed, her hands clasped together tightly as if trying to wash away the guilt. Tears still streamed down her face, but at least she met my gaze as she spoke. Tom, I'm so sorry, but this is the truth. The awful truth. Vince and I had been struggling for a long time when you contacted me almost 8 years ago. We were still together, mostly for Vinny, our son. I was in therapy trying to save our marriage, but he wasn't interested and it wasn't helping. Eventually, things got so bad that I realized I had to leave him. I consulted a lawyer and started the divorce process, but Vince brought up the prenup I signed 17 years ago and threatened to enforce it to the letter. I'd end up with next to nothing. Sure, there would be some money, but nowhere near what I was used to. So you're a gold digger too? No, not like that. You see, Vince had a strict prenup, and he had Rafael Bonadus, one of the top divorce lawyers in the state. You know, those lawyers for rich people and celebrities who want to protect their wealth? I had some young lawyer fresh out of law school who was so inexperienced and scared that she probably panicked the first time she met Mr. Bonadus. When we negotiated what I'd get in the divorce, I would have ended up with next to nothing. Vince would have been laughing all the way to the bank, and Mr. Bonadus was probably messing around with my young lawyer. Actually, given his reputation, I wouldn't be surprised if he was, even after our case was over. A damn gold digger, I repeated, convinced by her explanation. And it sounds like your lawyer was one too. Well, they say birds of a feather flock together. No! Vincent DePrimo is big in his family business. Car dealerships, rentals, insurance, real estate, you name it. Divorce doesn't look good to them. He agreed to let me have some freedom as long as I'm discreet about it and provide him with plausible deniability, and that I'm there to take care of his needs whenever he wants. I've been telling him I'm visiting my sister Trudy or going to a conference or something. While I'm away, it gives him the freedom to do, well, whatever he wants for the weekend, but I guess something came up this time. Yeah, probably his libido. Needed some attention, I'm guessing. She winced, her expression confirming it was likely true, and I swallowed hard to keep from throwing up right there. I'm really sorry, Tom. I still want to divorce him, but I just haven't had the resources or the backup plan I need to do it. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid of how you'd react. My stomach settled, if only briefly, and I let out a frustrated sigh. Maria, you knew how I felt, and that I'd react like this. Yet you kept it from me? What were you thinking? If you had been honest from the beginning, maybe we could have faced this together and figured something out. Now, I don't know. I'm so torn. I love you, and I'm furious with you at the same damn time. I've got to go. Tom, please stay tonight. Let's talk this through, please. Maria, I'm sorry, but as long as you're married, there's nothing to discuss. And honestly, even if you divorce him and come back to me, I don't know if there'll be anything left to say. I thought you were not just my lover, but my best friend too. But now you've shown me you're a cheater and a liar, and I don't know you like I thought I did, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again. No, I'm sorry, Maria, but I need to leave and think about all of this. She cried and begged as I packed, making grand promises if I'd stay, but I knew I couldn't be manipulated, whether by love or lust. Within 5 minutes, I had my things packed and was walking out the door, trying to block out her tears and pleas. My heart felt like it had a giant hole in it as I flew back home, and that feeling lingered in the days that followed. When Maria and I reunited at the reunion, after so many years, I knew there was a risk of falling in love with her right from the start. Even though I tried to be cautious and avoid it, especially given the distance between us, it was inevitable after spending that intense weekend together. I tried not to let myself love her, but I couldn't stop it. Yes, I came to love her deeply, and I still do, but now my world was in turmoil, engulfed in a blaze she had ignited. It tore at my heart for her, and it threatened to shatter the person I thought I was. I sighed heavily, unsure of what steps to take next and how to navigate the situation with integrity, dignity, and love, assuming any of those were still possible. Realizing we had already crossed the line into adultery, any hope of maintaining honor and dignity seemed lost. As for love, despite everything, I wanted to continue loving her, but I questioned whether I could, even if she wanted me to. I was filled with anger towards her and anxiety about where we might go from here if she chose to divorce her husband. If not, I feared I might never see her again. It took me a week of pouring my raw emotions into carefully crafted words on the screen of my computer. I edited and re-edited my thoughts until I felt they were coherent enough to send. In the email, I expressed that she should reach out if she decided to pursue divorce or if she chose to remain with her husband. If neither happened, I promised to contact her again in a few weeks. It wasn't explicitly stated that it might be our last communication, but if Maria couldn't read between the lines, maybe she wasn't as perceptive as I thought. Over the next few weeks, my job consumed me, not because it had to, but because it offered a distraction from the turmoil I felt over Maria and the guilt of compromising my moral compass. That changed one weekend in June when Evelyn came to visit. "Dad, I've missed you," Evelyn said as soon as she arrived. "You've seemed so distant lately. Even when we talk on the phone, it feels like your mind is elsewhere. What's been going on?" She hit the nail on the head. I hadn't intentionally neglected her, but the personal challenges I was facing had definitely affected my focus on her needs. "Sweetheart, your mom and I always tried to instill in you the importance of doing the right thing," I began cautiously. "But I have to admit, I recently made a mistake. I did something that wasn't right, and it may have hurt someone else." Evelyn nodded knowingly. "Dad, I'm 21 now. Remember last year when I was torn between two guys? Mom told me about her own mistake with you. You both shielded me from the truth back then, but Mom said I needed to hear it now so I could learn from her failure. Yes, that's exactly what she called it. And avoid making similar mistakes in my life. It was a tough lesson, but I made the right choice. You wouldn't deny me that opportunity to learn from your mistakes too, would you?" I glanced at Evelyn, grateful that she had grown into such a thoughtful young woman, even if her curiosity sometimes got the best of her. She placed her hand on mine and asked gently, "What's going on, Dad?" I hadn't planned on revealing my mistake to anyone, especially not to my daughter, but I realized it could be a valuable life lesson for her, reinforcing what her mom had already taught her and possibly guiding her in the future. Taking a deep breath, I decided to open up. I reconnected with an old friend and we ended up falling in love over a few months. Just when I was thinking about making things more serious, I discovered she wasn't actually divorced like she had told me. Ouch! So she lied to you and cheated on her husband? And now you're feeling guilty about it, even though you didn't know? Evelyn's quick understanding and insight didn't surprise me. She was on track to graduate with top honors next year, after all. Yeah, that's about right. She claims her husband isn't exactly a saint either, but two wrongs don't make a right, Evelyn finished my thought, showing that she remembered the moral lessons we had taught her from a young age. Dad, what matters is that it wasn't intentional, and you stopped as soon as you found out, right? Yeah, but I'm not sure where things go from here, I admitted, feeling uncertain about the future. Well, that's what you should focus on. Moving forward, not dwelling on the past, Evelyn advised wisely. Smart kid, indeed. I smiled at her, appreciating her maturity and understanding. A few days later, Sarah called me out of the blue. Is Evelyn all right? I asked, concerned by the timing of her call. Yeah, she's fine, Tom, but she seemed worried about you. She didn't give me any details, but I just wanted to check in and make sure everything's okay. Sarah, I'm all right. It's nothing serious. I should have stopped there and thanked her for reaching out, but our long history of sharing made me continue. I made a mistake recently, and it's been tough dealing with the consequences. I'm sorry to hear that. Do you want to talk about it? No, not really, I hesitated. Well, maybe. Can I ask you something personal? She chuckled. We've asked each other plenty of personal questions over the years. It's a first for you to ask if you can ask. Shoot. When you had your affair, did you ever feel guilty? Wow, that's really personal and unexpected. I'm sorry, you don't have to answer that. I'll catch up with you later, okay? Wait, Tom, I actually want to answer that. I was grown up enough to understand that what I was doing was wrong. I knew it could hurt you and damage our relationship if it came out, but the temptation was strong, and the first time I wasn't strong enough to resist. After I crossed that line I never intended to cross, it didn't make me braver, but maybe it emboldened me to keep going. I knew it was wrong, and yes, I felt guilty and dirty afterward. But there was also an extra thrill that made me think I could get away with it until I got caught. When it finally happened, it was a relief in some ways, but facing the consequences was much harder than I ever imagined. I've been paying for that mistake ever since and regretting it every day. I'm truly sorry, Tom, for what I did to you and to our relationship. I regret the trust I broke. Thank you, Sarah, for being honest with me. I appreciate it, even now. What's going on, Tom? Why are you bringing this up now? You're not married, but wait, are you involved with someone who is... I was seeing someone and we were getting serious, but then I found out the truth and realized I was involved in adultery too, even though I didn't choose it. Tom, don't blame yourself if you didn't know. I made a terrible choice looking back on it now. But if you were unaware that she was married, you can't hold yourself responsible for something you didn't know. Yeah, I keep trying to tell myself that. It's been tough. Don't let it eat you up, Tom. Just remember, now that you know, you're accountable for the choices you make moving forward. It might feel challenging, but I've known you a long time, honey, and I believe you'll make the right decisions. The days went by with no word from Maria, so I began drafting a message, a farewell that would express my feelings. It felt like those scenes in old movies where the protagonist crumples up note after note into a wastebasket. Except in my case, the digital recycle bin on my computer would have been overflowing with discarded drafts, were it not for the ease of editing on screen. One evening, I was deeply engrossed in yet another revision after work when the doorbell suddenly rang. Peering through the door's peephole, I saw a sharply dressed man accompanied by two burly men in ill-fitting suits on the sidewalk. They reminded me of an oversized version of the old Bobbsey twins, a strange thought given the circumstances. I cracked the door open and asked cautiously, "Can I help you?" "Mr. Jarrett, I'm Vincent DePrimo. We've never met, but you know my wife, Maria, quite intimately, I understand. We need to talk. May I come in?" "Mr. DePrimo, this really isn't a good time," I replied, feeling uneasy. "Mr. Jarrett, I've come all the way from New Jersey. My associates and I would appreciate it if you could find the time to let me in. It would be in your best interest," he said firmly. With the two hulking men looming behind him, I couldn't deny their implied threat. Come in, Mr. DePrimo," I relented, opening the door wider and hoping I wouldn't regret it. I shut the door quickly behind him, wary of the Bobbsey twins potentially barging in. If things went south and they tried to force their way in, I feared I'd have a situation on my hands, a home invasion I wasn't prepared to handle, or rebuild my house if I ever got over this. Luckily, as I closed the door, he motioned to his associates, who acknowledged with a nod, halting halfway up the steps. The deadbolt clicked into place, and I faced him. "Please, come in and have a seat in the living room. Can I get you some coffee, tea, soda, or maybe some scotch?" I offered after a brief pause. His serious demeanor cracked into a faint smile. "Scotch sounds perfect, Mr. Jarrett." I poured 2 glasses and handed one to him. "What can I help you with, Mr. DePrimo? Is everything all right with Maria?" He savored the aroma of the Macallan before taking a sip. "She's all right physically, but we're in couples counseling. She's been telling me she's visiting her sister in Ohio or attending conferences for the past 7 or 8 months. Except for a trip to Cleveland in April, I don't think she's been in Ohio or seen her sister Trudy except during Christmas." After another sip, he continued. "Which brings me to why I'm here, Mr. Jarrett. Did you ever sleep with my wife?" He stared into my eyes, seemingly knowing the truth. I remembered Maria's admission about plausible deniability and hoped she hadn't lied to me again. "Mr. DePrimo, Maria was an old and dear friend. I was mistaken about her marital status, but I assure you, I cared for her and would never betray her trust." I held his gaze, hoping he believed my sincerity. For me, my time with Maria was about love, not just physical pleasure. Vince DePrimo stared at me for what felt like an eternity before finishing his scotch in one gulp and placing the glass down firmly on the coffee table. "Good," he said firmly. "Now that's settled, there's one more thing. Maria is my wife, and despite our difficulties, I intend to keep it that way. I strongly advise you to stay away from her. If I hear of you two reconnecting or communicating, you won't like the outcome. However, if she goes through with a divorce and takes the financial hit we agreed on, then I won't care what you do with her. But consider if you want to invest your time in someone who has shown herself to be a liar and cheater. If she can cheat on me, her husband of 25 years and the father of her child, just think about what she might do to you." He stood up and added, "Thank you for your time, your attention, and the scotch. Goodbye, Mr. Jarrett. I hope our paths don't cross again for everyone's sake." After he left, I poured another glass of Macallan and locked the deadbolt. My heart raced as I reflected on the situation. Over the past 8 or 9 months, I developed strong feelings for Maria. But she had lied to me, omitting her husband from her life story. I grew to resent her for what she had done to me, to us, and to her husband. Despite her claims of his infidelity, Maria had shown herself to be deceitful and disloyal, just as Mr. DePrimo had warned. I couldn't be sure if her accusations against him were true or false. Whether he had cheated or not didn't change things. Even if he had, it didn't justify her lying and cheating. More importantly, it didn't give her the right to involve me in her deceitful behavior. I found myself caught in her tangled mess, but it wasn't by my choice. I'd grown to love Maria, but it wasn't the real her. It was the persona she presented. Once I accepted this, I knew what I needed to do. A few days later, an overnight package arrived at my office. Inside was a handwritten letter from Maria atop a stack of bound papers. "Dearest Tom, I deeply regret everything that has transpired. I'm taking steps to make things right so I can move forward and perhaps give our relationship a chance. Enclosed is the first part of the certified divorce petition to prove my sincerity. I never should have lied to you or used you. I'm truly sorry and vow never to deceive you again." She also shared her new address, phone number, and a private email address. Her heartfelt message brought tears to my eyes. After pondering all afternoon, aided by the rest of the bottle of Macallan, I sat down with my laptop that evening. I started typing her new email address but stopped. Despite Vincent DePrimo's warning, what I needed to convey couldn't be expressed through email or over the phone. I closed the email and opened my favorite travel app. A few days later, I took a chance and sent Maria a message through her new private email, hoping Vincent DePrimo wouldn't intercept it from my temporary email address that I'd likely never use again. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe in Newark. When Maria arrived, she rushed over and tried to embrace me, saying, "Oh, Tom, I've missed you so much. I'm relieved you're here. You took so long to respond, I was really worried." I shook my head and gestured for her to sit down. "Maria, hold on, we need to talk." She sensed what was coming and pleaded with me, shaking her head. "Tom, please, don't do this, please." Her plea was painful, like being stabbed again, but I persisted with what needed to be said. Maria, I loved you then, and I still do. But you played a dangerous game with your husband and with me, using both of us because you couldn't make a decisive choice. You tried to have us both, thinking maybe it was safe because of the distance between us. But I fell for you deeply, and I was willing to do anything, for you to come to me, or even for me to move here. But it all fell apart, as it was bound to when built on deception rather than honesty. I wanted to tell you, Tom, I really did, but it's too late for explanations, Maria. None of it matters now. You're finally getting the divorce you should have sought before getting involved with me. You've lost a man who once loved you, and now you've lost me too, the other guy who cared deeply for you. No, Tom, we can fix this. I promise. I'll do anything to make it work so we can be together. No, Maria, you played a dangerous game and we both ended up losing. She tried to argue again, but I raised my hand to stop her. No, Maria, it's not my decision anymore. You ensured that from the start. No matter how hard we try now, we can't undo the damage. There's no happy ending for us. I'm sorry, but this is goodbye. Her eyes pleaded with me to reconsider, but they saw my resolve and she slowly nodded in acceptance. I'm truly sorry, Tom. I wish I had been clearer-headed and made the right choices. I wasn't sure if clarity was her issue, but I agreed with her apology. Me too, Maria. Take care, and I hope you find happiness. Tears streamed down Maria's cheeks as I walked away, my own heartache hidden inside. Surprisingly, the plane had plenty of empty seats. Mine was near the back, with no one occupying either the window or middle seat to my left. I barely paid attention to the safety instructions. I had flown on the 737 so many times that I could have recited them myself. The flight attendant who came by to check on my seatbelt, stowage of my personal item, tray table position, and seat alignment hardly registered with me. During takeoff, I shut my eyes, attempting to push thoughts of Maria from my mind. Images of her floated around me, reminiscent of the alluring figures in those James Bond opening sequences, tempting me to join her once more. "Excuse me, sir?" the attendant asked a while later as beverage service began. "Can I get you anything?" "Just water, please," I replied, looking up at her. She had blue eyes, a pleasant smile, and a short bob of dark hair, looking every bit the quintessential flight attendant in her uniform. I tried to muster a smile. "Nothing stronger?" "You look like you've lost your best friend," she remarked. "I did. I ended things with her." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." She handed me the water and moved on, and I returned to my thoughts and frustrations. "Hey again," came a soft whisper. Services paused for a bit. "Want to talk about it? About what happened, since I've already pried and all?" I couldn't help but smile a bit more genuinely this time. "Is the airline offering in-flight psychologists now along with movies?" She chuckled. "No, but you looked so sad. And then what you said hit close to home. I went through something similar a while back when I realized he preferred things the way they were over being with me. 5 years wasted. Do you want to share your story? Or should I leave you be? Thanks for noticing and asking. Not many people do that these days. Lesson 1 in recovering from a breakup. There are still good people out there. Thanks. You know, despite my initial doubts, I'm actually enjoying this extra service." She laughed. "Good to hear. So, do you want to share a bit about your situation? Maybe I can offer some fresh insights on what happened, give you some bang for your buck if that's okay." "Yeah, sure, thanks. My girlfriend and I have been apart for a while now after I caught her lying. She's tried to patch things up, but I just can't trust her enough to make our relationship permanent, especially after a similar situation with my ex. You know what they say, once bitten, twice shy? Yeah, I get it. My ex-husband betrayed my trust. I gave him another chance, and he hurt me even worse by cheating again. I learned my lesson the hard way. I'm sorry to hear that." "Thanks, but that was 12 years ago. Somehow, I've been lucky since then. It wasn't planned, but I've managed to avoid him ever since. Too bad we're on a plane. There's no wood for you to knock on." She shrugged. "I don't think it would make a difference. I'm older now, and he probably hasn't changed much either. If we ever happen to cross paths again, I'll just keep quiet and walk right past him. Oh, and I'll do the same with Benjamin, my status quo guy." Despite her duties, which didn't take long due to the empty plane, she surprised me by returning. We continued our conversation for most of the flight, which lifted my spirits and brightened my mood. After we landed and the passengers in front started disembarking, I thought about what lay ahead and let out a sigh. Don't be too hard on yourself. It hurts, but it's not the end of the world. You'll be okay. Turning, I saw her standing in the aisle just behind my row of seats. I got up from my window seat and stood upright in front of her, ducking under the overhead bins. "Thanks for talking with me. You really made this miserable flight much better. By the way, I'm Tom." She smiled and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Tom. I'm Cindy," we both said simultaneously, pointing to her name tag. She chuckled and handed me a card. "I don't usually give these out, but I have a feeling you could use a friend. If you ever want to talk, my cell number is on there." I took the card and glanced at it. "Thanks, Cindy, and thanks, something. I might just do that." We said our goodbyes after we got off the plane and didn't see each other again. As I made my way to the parking lot for my car, I set down my carry-on bag, pulled out my phone, and Cindy's card. I scanned her card into my contacts and then opened a message to her. "Hi, Cindy. It's Tom from the plane. This is my cell. It was great talking to you. Hope our paths cross again sometime." I remembered Vincent DePrimo's ominous parting words, but they felt fitting now. It was too early and I was still hurting too much to say more. By sending this message, maybe Cindy would remember me if I ever reached out for real. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and walked out of the terminal into the bright sun. Despite the Texas heat making me sweat immediately, I looked forward to the cool air conditioning inside. Yet before I'd gone 30 feet, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. I checked it and read, "Cindy, hi Tom, me too." Her brief reply warmed my heart more than the scorching sun. Maria was out of my life now, but maybe I'd find new love in the future, perhaps with Cindy or someone else. I didn't have to be alone and lonely forever. Almost forgetting about the summer heat and feeling a new sense of optimism, I smiled and looked ahead to what lay ahead. 35 years later, at our reunion with tickets in hand, I headed to the bar. The closest one to our table had a long line, so I walked further around the ballroom to the next one. As I made my way, I reflected on how much everyone had changed since our 25-year reunion. Many had gained weight, lost hair, and showed more signs of aging with extra lines on their faces. Some had gray hair, and a few tried to fight aging with hair dyes, transplants, or plastic surgery, with mixed results. Now in our late 50s, most of us from our graduating class seemed to be in decent shape and enjoying themselves. However, a few individuals looked much older, perhaps due to genetics or a life of hard living, showing how time had affected their appearance and, in many cases, their health. They were hardly recognizable compared to our youthful days together. In fact, aside from a handful of close friends and those I've kept in touch with, most of my classmates were now distant memories, some barely recognizable. Then there was a table in one corner of the ballroom marked with a single battery-operated candle, thanks to the fire marshal. It bore the words "In Memoriam," listing the names of those who had passed away for various reasons over the years. Keith Schilling, always struggling with weight, passed away as expected due to heart issues, leaving behind his wife Gabby and their almost grown children. The deaths that hit hardest were Larry and Nina Kilgrove, who tragically died in a plane crash when their Piper lost power, leaving no safe place to land. Mark, Andy, and I had served as pallbearers at their funeral. Arriving at the next bar, I found only a few people in line ahead of me. I waited, scanning faces to see if I could recognize anyone before resorting to reading their name tags. Not spotting anyone familiar nearby, I turned back to the front as the line moved forward. The man at the bar seemed a bit tipsy, flirting with the young female bartender who looked much younger than my wife, Evelyn, now a mother of two with a third child on the way. With drinks in hand, the man turned towards me, and upon closer inspection, I realized I knew him but couldn't place him until I saw his name tag labeled Guest. "Mr. Jarrett, I wondered if we'd meet here," he said with a smile. "Mr. DePrimo, I'm surprised to see you," I replied. He grinned. "Why not? My wife, though she graduated a semester late, was one of your classmates, remember?" My heart raced at the mention of Maria. When we parted, she was divorcing him. Had something changed to bring them back together? Turning to shout, DePrimo called out, "Maria, get over here. Come see your old flame." No, I hadn't heard from Maria since I walked out of that small restaurant in New Jersey over 9 years ago. But here she was, approaching me. Her smile, always quick to appear, was absent as she came closer. She glanced at Vince DePrimo, who nodded before turning to me. "Hi, Tom. I was hoping I'd find you here." "Hi, Maria. I didn't see your name on the guest list, so I didn't expect you. How have you been?" "Tell you what, you two catch up. I'll be over at our table, watching." DePrimo nodded at me as if asserting his dominance, then exchanged a look with Maria before heading to their table a few spots back from the bar. Glancing over, I noticed he was watching me intently, like he was scrutinizing every move. Maria looked at me and hesitated. "I know what you're thinking. Why?" I nodded. "I wanted to leave him, but when you said goodbye, I had to make a tough decision. It seemed easier to stay and tolerate his indiscretions than to start fresh on my own. He treats me well most—" A hand touched my elbow, interrupting us. "Hey, Tom, I was wondering where you went," said Gabby. "Oh, hi, Maria. I'm Gabby, from our class," she added, noticing Maria looking at her name tag. She slid her hand down my forearm and intertwined her fingers with mine. And Tom's wife, of course. Maria's expression as she glanced at Gabby and then at me was priceless, a mix of surprise and denial. She greeted Gabby briefly and then found a reason to leave. I watched her depart, briefly wondering about what might have been before refocusing on reality. And, I thought, reality was so much better. As Gabby and I ordered our drinks, I reflected on how fortunate I was and all that had transpired. After meeting Cindy on the flight, we dated for a while, proving that there are good people out there, even if they aren't always the right match. This realization helped me move forward in life. When Keith passed away about a year later, I supported a grieving Gabby with some of the arrangements and spoke at Keith's funeral. We remained friends over the years, with me checking in on her occasionally to offer support and listen to her frustrations. However, it wasn't until Larry and Nina's funeral, nearly 3 years later, and after Gabby had processed her grief, that we truly connected and started to build something deeper. Unexpectedly hitting it off, we married just over a year later. Returning to our table with friends, Gabby remarked, "Maria doesn't look happy, does she?" "No, I don't think so," I agreed. "She played a deceitful game and lost. Now she's serving her time until one of them passes away or they give up and move on. Since I doubt they'll ever give up, I bet they'll both live into their 90s just out of spite to deny each other the satisfaction. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes," Gabby chuckled, quoting a saying. "Or in this case, wicked games, as you said." Speaking of games, want to take a break for a bit? I've got an idea for a game we can play upstairs that might take your mind off her and everything else. We dropped off Mark and Jane's drinks at the table and told them we were going for a walk, though from their look at each other, I knew they didn't buy it. As we walked away, Gabby leaned in and whispered, "We've given them an idea. They'll be right behind us, 5 minutes tops." Chuckling, I agreed, saying, "Let's pick up the pace so they don't catch us." We retraced our steps from the conference center to the hotel. Barely getting the door to our room closed, Gabby was all over me, showing me how much she loved me, and that dwelling on the past was a waste of time. Our clothes were off in moments, slipping off between kisses and gentle touches, and then we were in bed, eager for each other. Gabby climbed on top of me, pressing close as we moved together. With tender kisses, she brought us even closer, focusing only on us and nothing else in the world. Together, we reached the peak of pleasure, Gabby letting out a wonderful moan, and me a prolonged, satisfied groan, giving our all to each other before she settled gently on me, my arms wrapped around her, holding her close. "I love you, Tom," she whispered, breathless. "I love you too, sweetheart." We lay there catching our breath for a few minutes before I asked about heading back to our class party. Gabby shook her head. "I'd be up for staying right here all night if you want. Instead of heading back down to the party, we'll see everyone in our group at breakfast tomorrow anyway." I think you're onto something," I replied, thinking about Vincent DePrimo. "Yeah, we've probably bumped into enough people for one day. The only person I'm interested in seeing again tonight is you. So, if you're ready, let's work on uncrossing these." Gabby giggled, and we both smiled. Honestly, I'm not sure who had the bigger smile, but at that moment, I decided I was willing to stay up all night if necessary to find out.